Well, New Zealand's reputational trajectory as a safe haven offering sustainable quality food is being given an extra boost with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise's latest marketing initiative. New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Chief Executive Peter Chrisp has said that the Made with Care campaign is about representing a unique, broad collaboration between trade, food and beverage, and of course our wonderful tourism. NZTE's role is to create promotional material around this so that companies can access that off the shelf and use within their business. Peter joins us now. Welcome to Sarah's Country, Peter. This is an exciting campaign.
Kia ora, Sarah. Yes, it is an exciting campaign, and probably just to step back for a minute and just talk about what is obvious, which is that with the global pandemic, the food and beverage manufacturers in New Zealand have really struggled to get their messages into markets because they can't travel, and they've normally done an enormous amount of face-to-face engagement with the customers. So it's a great time to step up the messaging about New Zealand's offer into the world.
So whereabouts the whole concept around Made with Care? Are we trying to build on New Zealand's reputation globally from how we've handled COVID?
Well, not so much referring to COVID directly. In fact, we're being very careful not to talk about COVID because that's a very complex and emotional topic all around the world, actually. And so we're not going to go there and saying, hey, we're COVID-free, look at us. Rather, we're just using the opportunity to underline some of the fundamental qualities about us as New Zealanders and about some of the products and services that come out of the country. So, and actually this story started with an initiative from the tourism sector, believe it or not, because the tourism sector were very concerned about going dark in international markets, meaning that they couldn't afford not to have a tourism message in international markets because it takes a tourist 2 years to make their mind up. And just because they can't get to New Zealand at the moment, we shouldn't not be talking about tourism in international markets, but they couldn't run a campaign saying, come to New Zealand. They just had to run a campaign about New Zealand to keep New Zealand in the mind of the international community. So they ran a campaign called Messages from New Zealand. It was very subtle, and they had 38 million hits on that campaign and about an 80% rating, positive sentiment rating for that campaign. And then we said, okay, well, that looks pretty good and strong. Let's then go out with specifically something around food and beverage. So then we designed a campaign that talked about the underlying qualities of our food and beverage: safe, ethical, premium, tasty, and sustainable, working across the sectors, across the companies, public and private. And then we went out with that campaign, and that's going out to the same target markets. And then the last campaign to follow up with will be a campaign that focuses on the underlying ingenuity and the tech sector in New Zealand, because that's also a very important sector. So you've got these three campaigns: a tourist campaign, a food and beverage Made with Care campaign, and an ingenuity and tech campaign, all running off the same song sheet. And that's the first time ever in the history of the country we've gone out that coherently into the world.
But it has been a long time coming, though, hasn't it? This collaboration to put New Zealand on the world stage as a foodie destination.
Yes, I think you're right, and I think what COVID has done in so many spheres, is to accelerate some of the trends that were already there. And so, yes, we've put a lot of time in, as has the companies and the sectors, with talking about the food offering. And we think that New Zealand's got a very special food offering. We'd say it's not just good food, it's good for the world. The quality of this production system, and sure, we've got issues and we don't hide from the issues, but over time, I think the story of the country is that we face our issues and resolve our issues over time. That gives us a food production system that ultimately we think is not just good for the people, it's good for the world. And so that story has been out there for quite some time, but what COVID has done is given us the opportunity and the requirement to accelerate that story.
How about making the messages different for our different markets, in particular our Asian markets, as opposed to our Northern Hemisphere, European and US markets?
Yeah, well, you're right. Well, just to recap on the market. So I think one of the benefits of this approach is we're focused. And so, because there's an inverse relationship between how much you focus and how much results you get. The more you focus and the more strategy you have, the more success you get. And so we have really focused on Japan, China, UK, USA, and Australia. Those are the target markets across all of the campaigns. And then, of course, in the different markets, we dial up different aspects of that campaign. So we know, for example, without exaggerating it too much, we know that in China, they are deeply, deeply and primarily concerned with what they ingest and the human consumption. The health of their human consumption is a big driver. That driver is also a strong presence in other markets, but when you get to the west coast of the US and up into Europe and Germany, you get the concern with human health, but also the concern about the drawdown on the planet at the same time. Is this food system good for the planet? Not just is it good for humans? And so, yes, we then pitch up those messages slightly subtly different in different markets.
I was just thinking about the words of KPMG's Ian Proudfoot, the three things that we have to focus on: sustainability, provenance, and digitisation. And this is just playing straight into that.
Absolutely. And I think, the reason why it's called Made with Care, we think the country story across all sectors actually is that New Zealanders are people that looks after people in place over generations. So we think that is the essence of our country. Aitiaki, we care. Tiaki means to care. We look after people in place over generations, and we apply a lot of ingenuity and cleverness and practicality in order to do that. We think that is the essence of our country story across most of our sectors. So the food and beverage story is not just a story to say that it's made with care, but it's made with clever care. There's a lot of science inside our food production story. There's a huge amount of monitoring. There's a huge amount of safe, scientifically informed standards in our food production system. So that clever care, we think, is the essence of the story.
However, in a lot of the discussions on Serious Country, when we've been talking about the rise of nationalism around the world and the importance of trade on New Zealand, you'll be welcoming with open arms Jacinda saying she wants to forefront this with her global popularity, because we can also be squashed in our markets for being too made with care.
Absolutely. That is one of the threats, and that's one of the original drivers of the campaign. We think there's definitely big buy local trends all around the world at the moment for local loyalty reasons, but also people wanting to shore up their own supply chains, reduce the risk of sourcing from other countries. That is definitely a trend. And so, yes, the Made with Care campaign is a campaign that tries to mitigate some of those threats.
And I know influencer marketing is one of your big strategies going forward. You could not get a bigger influencer than our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Thank you so much for joining us. CEO there for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Peter Chrisp. And that, if you want to check it out, go to YouTube and type in Made with Care. Check out that absolutely beautiful video that they've put together for the campaign.
This is Sarah's Country.